Ladies and gentlemen, in this Red Game Institute video, we're going to be discussing the Xbox One and the PlayStation 4, and recent comments from Microsoft that, and I quote, "More gigaflops and teraflops don't matter at the end of the day, it's all about the games." So we're going to be discussing this just for a little bit, I'll quote. So, there have been numerous reports recently regarding the consoles, saying that the PlayStation 4 is up to 50% faster than the Xbox One. They've said everything from the GPU performance is inferior to the ESRAM is a pain / terrible to use. They've criticised the DDR3 memory and so on. Other developers have been a bit kinder to it. However, general consensus from the developers who have spoken seem to indicate that the Xbox One is a bit more difficult to develop for and doesn't offer so much performance. But Microsoft are keen to point out that that's not all there is to the story. Phil Harrison, of course, the corporate vice president of Microsoft's interactive entertainment business, and yes, that is a mouthful to say, has commented on this, and he has said the following. Well, I think there are a couple of things I would like to say. One is that every platform I've ever been involved in, somebody has said, oh, this one has more gigaflops or more teraflops than the other one, and at the end of the day, it never really matters. It's all about having the best games and having the most impressive experience, and clearly the Xbox One has the best games. So that would be my first response. The other is that at any time you ask a developer, including, by the way, our own internal studios, in the run-up to launch of a console, you're going to get a slightly nuanced answer because the operating system's not finished. The performance of the machine is not locked. And as you may be aware, we can increase the GPU and CPU capacity of the Xbox One. So I think it's impossible to draw any conclusions from that based upon pre-launch unfinished hardware and unfinished OS. My main response is going to be that it's all about having the best gaming experience and the widest possible set of content that people want to play. End quote. So let's just discuss this a little bit. Now, of course, Microsoft can't exactly say, well, yeah, we've made the inferior system, but Phil does have a couple of really good points. There are several instances of systems which have been inferior. Let's just be honest, yeah. Let's just call a spade, as the saying goes, and just say that some systems have been technically inferior. I mean, the classic one that you can just use to anyone is the Game Boy. The Game Boy was pretty much inferior to all of the PlayStation Vita. It was inferior to the PSP. It was inferior to the Game Gear even. The Atari Lynx, it was inferior to all of them. Whether it be the screen, whether it be the processor, whether it be the memory on board, or whether it be whatever. It was inferior to one of the consoles. Guess what? Didn't matter. It kicked ass. It really did. It just beat all the competitors by a significant margin. There were, of course, numerous issues with the Genesis, or the Mega Drive if you're in Europe, regarding the SNES. That's not to say the SNES was a perfect console, but the Genesis did have some issues regarding the video processor. Then, of course, you've got the PlayStation 2 versus the Xbox, the original Xbox, and even the GameCube. The GameCube was significantly more powerful in some ways than the PlayStation 2. And may I remind you of the PlayStation 3 and the Xbox 360. Now, obviously, the gulf between the two consoles isn't really that much. I mean, sure, the Xbox 360 had a better GPU, it had a slightly inferior CPU, but generally speaking, the PS3 was a lot harder to program for. And there was a lot of, oh dear God, this system is created terribly. I mean, do you remember Valve? They said, pretty much, and this is not verbatim, but you can Google it, that Sony should pretty much scrap the PlayStation 3, pretended it didn't exist, redesign the entire thing from scratch, and just apologize to everyone, say, you know what, we made a mistake, we're just gonna remake this thing from the ground up, you know, you just have to wait and relaunch it in a couple of years' time. And that was regarding, of course, the cell processor, which Gabe Newell said that it was very hard to work with. He knew this at the time, he knew it at the start, as well as the memory system. But did it matter? Did it matter a jot, an iota? Nope, it didn't. At the end of the day, the Xbox 360, the PlayStation 3 were both very successful. Sure, in one region it may have done better than the other, but ultimately I don't really think you could say the PlayStation 3 or the Xbox 360 was a failure. And I would argue the same for all the other consoles I've mentioned. Obviously there are numerous other examples. Does that necessarily mean that the Xbox One is not going to be at a disadvantage? No. I am firmly of the belief that, and this is judging from purely what the developers have said as right now, but I'm firmly of the belief that we're probably going to be seeing a gulf between the PlayStation 4 and the Xbox One. Now, the performance gulf, I'm not sure exactly what it's going to be, and there are numerous reasons behind this. Primarily because the hardware, the operating systems, and much more isn't finished. Now, I wouldn't be surprised if we're looking at anything from between 25 to 50% difference if you're going by pure GPU specifications. Personally speaking, I think the ESRAM is going to be a bit of a nightmare for developers. I think it's going to take a long time for them to get used to it. But I do think Microsoft do have some smart people. With that said, it's still going to be a bit more difficult to use than the memory of the Xbox than the PlayStation 4. At the end of the day, though, does it really matter to you? Now, this is going to be something that you are going to have to answer yourselves. I obviously cannot give you advice on this. I've had people say to me, well, what system are you buying? Or what system, would you recommend? And honestly speaking, it's pretty much impossible for me to tell you. I mean, personally, I'm swinging towards the PlayStation 4 because of Infamous. I'm an absolute sucker for the series, I love it. Killzone looks pretty damn sweet. However, I will say that the Xbox One's launch games are looking very good as well. You've of course got Killer Instinct, which does look insanely fun. Titanfall and a couple of the other games are being released on the PC, but then so are a couple of the PlayStation 4's big games as well. Dead Rising 3 does look pretty cool. I'm not personally interested in driving, so that rules out 2 of the titles, or 1 on each system, of course. So, my point being that it's all about the games. I think that you personally have to weigh in the budgets. I think you have to work out, what system is going to be best for you. Having said all of that, the bottom line is, of course, one system is going to look better than the other. It's invariable, and I'm not saying that that's going to be the PlayStation 4, I'm not saying that's going to be the Xbox One, but most likely one system is definitely going to have the edge. From all the reports so far, the Xbox One is having trouble running Battlefield 4 at the same resolution of the PlayStation 4. So in other words, the Xbox One version currently is running at 720p, the PS4's version is running at 900p. There is some conflicting reports, so I don't want to say one way or the other, that the PlayStation 4's version does look a little bit visually better. There are some reports stating that there are better models and so on. Some theories are that if you were to be running it on a PC, both versions would be equivalent to be transferred to a PC, then the PS4 version would have a slightly higher graphical setting. I'm not confirming that, I'm not going to deny that, I don't know, because I've not played either build yet, and even if I had played either build, I wouldn't have a split screen comparison and so on, so it's still too early, especially because the games have not been launched. There are, however, consistent stories that do seem to indicate that the PlayStation 4's versions do seem a lot easier to develop for. There was, of course, the Call of Duty incident, where Call of Duty Ghosts is reported to be running at 15 frames per second when it was ported to the Xbox One, and 90 on the PS4, however, that was without optimization. My gut feeling is that that means developers will need to spend a lot more time developing, or at least optimizing, the Xbox One's version, but that may not necessarily mean a damn thing for you. What will definitely mean a damn thing for you is which system is better. For example, let's just assume that you're already an Xbox 360 gamer, and therefore you've already got Live, you've already got your friends on there, a lot of people are already going to be, moving on to it, whatever, then, you know, the Xbox 360, Xbox One is a logical progression for your system. On the other hand, if you're already a PlayStation gamer primarily, then obviously it doesn't really make a difference. If you're, you know, don't really care either way, then obviously it's much more down open. Obviously there's also the price difference as well. Do I agree that T and G flops don't matter? Well, kind of. I think they don't matter in terms of as long as the games are good, but I think that it will hurt for cross-platform development. In other words, even if it doesn't necessarily affect, say, the PlayStation 4 version or the PC version with, say, lower resolution graphics, just for example, let's assume that the rumours are true about the Xbox One being 50% slower, and that's an assumption just for the purposes of this. It could affect the PS4 because, you know, maybe the developers don't put so much work into the engine because, you know, they want some parity between the two. Maybe, you know, it makes the Xbox One version run at a lower resolution. Maybe it means that you have to put up with 30 frames per second rather than 60. Maybe you get more slowdown. Maybe you have a harsher LOD. Maybe you have less draw distance, whatever the developers have to do for your particular title, for that particular title. In the end, though, you're still going to play it. So what I'd personally say to you is, what system is looking better for you in terms of, well, the game's lineup, and, you know, what system is going to offer better entertainment and value for what you want. In the end, I think it's far too early to make any kind of assumptions of whether the Xbox One or the PS4 are going to be more successful than the other. I would personally say right now, however, that the bets are on the PlayStation 4 being more popular, at least with developers. But once again, it's still very early into the race. Anyway, hopefully you've enjoyed the relatively interesting interview. It's not been a particularly long one, but it's certainly giving some food for thought, at least from Microsoft's perspectives. Obviously, it's very PR-y of them, and I don't think they would be saying this if the shoe was on the other foot. And obviously Sony would be the ones that are saying this if the shoe was on the other foot. It's just, you know, standard PR business, but still. I think it is important for us to remember that the games are ultimately what do matter, but I just think for many people it's going to be very difficult to remember that if one system is perceived to be considerably slower. Anyway, hopefully you've enjoyed the video. I'll see you soon. Take care. Bye for now.